I tend to think that a composer is like an artist in general. So I have a lot of artistic memories from my early childhood that not necessarily relate to music so directly, but I feel like they're quite important because, like, if you remember something aesthetic from like when you were four, that's bound to have an impact on your life as an adult artist. And I was just a few days ago, I don't know why I remembered a play that I saw when I was a little kid, and I think I was like 5 or 4 years old, but it really stuck with me. Several of the images because it was very fascinating. I don't even remember the story, but there was a female character that had to drink from like a little clay cup she had, which symbolized her soul, and there were these giant puppets controlled by several people, like dressed in black,
Yeah.
Um, and I remember that play very vividly, despite I don't remember anything about the story. But I think what really got to me, even in those days, was that it was very powerful emotionally. So thankfully nowadays we have AI to help us with a search on the internet. So I actually found out the name of the play, which I'm very happy because I'll try to find it, and if I can, I'll see it again. It's called El Pozo de los Mil Demonios, which means the well of the thousand demons. So that it's funny because it's not really a composition or a music related experience, but it was very, very powerful. And it's one of my earliest artistic memories.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because I mean, so much of what we encounter, especially as children, as young people, and even as like young adults. I mean, I remember going to like art museums and seeing like, you know, paintings with like these textures on them that I'd never thought about before. And I was, at this point I was like, I was composing, but I was like a young person composing, right? I was like a baby composer. And just seeing the textures on the canvas got me thinking about music in so many different ways. So it totally makes sense that, this play would have like an artistic impression on you that would later perhaps manifest in your music compositional work, which I'm sure we'll get into soon.
I no, I agree 100%. And now that you mentioned that, I have another very important memory from my early childhood because my parents were like very prone to taking me and my brother to art exhibits and things like that. And for some reason, it got into their mind that they wanted to take us to an exhibition of abstract expressionism.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like several rooms full of these very completely abstract paintings where basically the message was communicated through color, form, texture. So it was very abstract, very vivid, and I remember looking at it, and I was very impressed by all the visual information I was receiving. But I also felt like this is my language. I felt like I could. I mean, I'm not a painter or anything, but if I were, I might be an abstract expressionist.
Yeah, I gotcha. So these are like early kind of artistic impressions that you're getting from other kind of disciplines. Can you tell me about the moment that you, whether intentionally or unintentionally, like put notes on a page as a composer? Like, what was that like?
Well, that started happening a little later on. I mean, I guess I was in my late childhood, early teens. My dad is a musician also. He plays guitar. So he had me and my brother playing with him, jamming a lot. And at some point, our childhood was basically witnessing how my dad would play in bands
Mm,
sometimes. And sometimes he would split up from a band, and sometimes he would start a new project, like that happens with artists. And at some point, he broke up with one of his bands, and he decided he wanted to go solo, and he bought a keyboard which had a sequencer.
Oh, yeah.
And that was pretty awesome because he could do his music on his own. He didn't need a band. And then he taught us how to use the sequencer. And at the time, I used to be a drummer. I played drums, you know? I have a big relationship with percussion instruments, and the drums were my first instrument. But the second instrument was that keyboard. And at first, what I would do is like record some basic, make up some basic tracks so I could play along with the drums. And it was an interesting process because I started spending every time more of my musical activity time on the sequencer and less on the drums,
Mm,
until it happened at some point that I went into the studio. We had a little studio in the house, and I just went straight to the keyboard and made like a complete song, and I didn't even touch the drums that day. So I spent probably most of my teenage years just sitting on that keyboard making little pieces of music. And those like 6 years of my life. Yeah, and by the way, I didn't know anything about music theory, music notation, aside from the very basic stuff they would teach us at school. But I barely knew anything about the treble clef and some basic rhythmic notation. But I didn't use those tools at all. It was just like spending time on the sequencer, hitting record, trying to play a tune with a specific sound that I chose, and then just making music from there. And that's really how I it's funny because it's really how I learned to make music, more than probably more than when I actually decided to become a composer and study formal music. I mean, I do see those years as very fundamental in my formative years.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Micromaker by Loose Leaf Transmissions. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the inner workings of the creative life. If this resonated with you, be sure to check out the full conversation on Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast exploring craft and process, philosophy and inspiration, and the honest, often messy parts of being an artist, creative uncertainty, purpose and identity, and resilience. You can find Music Maker wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting musicmakerpodcast.com.